just let me tell you the breaking news. The UK economy recorded no growth in the third quarter, revised down from an initial estimate of 0.1%, the Office for National Statistics has just said. So that is terrible economic news for the United Kingdom. The UK economy recorded no growth in the third quarter, revised down from the estimate of 0.1%. This is the ONS, and we've been talking a great deal about the UK being on the edge of a recession. We've seen absolutely no growth there. The honeymoon very much over for the Labour government. Joining me now, James Price, former government special advisor to the Conservative Party. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Christmas almost.
Yeah, happy Christmas to you too. Just let's look at this. The Labour Party came in, they were triumphant in their win. I think it's fair to say people didn't really vote for the Labour Party. They voted against your lot, against the Conservative Party, over what they saw was mismanagement, years of actually neglecting the United Kingdom. And, of course, Labour won by default. I think it's also fair to say that Labour was disingenuous. They didn't level with the public as to what they were going to do.
I think you're right on all counts. So the disingenuous is perhaps maybe too polite a word. I know it's early in the morning, but I would say that they were flat-out liars. All of the horrible things that they have done and inflicted on the country for absolutely no gain so far. The only people gaining out of this Labour government clearly are their trade union paymasters and, frankly, the Communist Party of China, if Labour get their way of giving away sovereign British territory in a crucial part of the world. They're the only people getting a happy Christmas out of Labour this year. But you're right, it has been a really, really sharp fall. And I think even someone as partisan as I am is surprised by it. You had all of this talk that Sue Gray, this kind of maestro of the civil service, was planning for government, and they had all these great plans. They were going to come in and fix everything and all this kind of stuff. I think some of the more naive members of the Labour Party genuinely thought that they believed their own kind of rhetoric and said, well, the Tories are evil, and once we get the evil Tories out, everything will be wonderful and it'll all be sweetness and light again, not realising, A, that's not how it works, and B, frankly, the kind of ministers who come in are not actually that powerful anymore. The system is set up so as to prevent you from making the kind of radical change that we need in this country in order to fix it.
It's a great.
Say the word reform.
It's a great point, actually. I heard an interview with Dominic Cummings who was basically saying exactly that. The system has changed so dramatically that pretty much government are puppets, that when you see the ministers walking into Downing Street, it is like show ponies.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And look, my experience in government is like that. You know, you get into a department like the Department for Education and you think, okay, actually we did some really good things. Probably one of the few departments that the Conservatives ran really well and got all kinds of great change for children across the land in schools. And actually the schools were being run for the pupils, not for the teaching unions, of course. But you get in there and there's a limit to what you can actually do and change, the kind of levers that you pull if the people in this top in number 10 are not willing to take on the civil service and help you smash it up. Just for context for the people who are watching, when we were in the Department for Education, there was about 4 special advisors like me, 4 or 5 or 6 ministers who are either MPs or Lords, and then 8,500 civil servants, right? Even just trying to keep track of all of the bad things they were doing, you know, all the kind of woke nonsense that was going on and all the rest of it, took up more time than we had, let alone trying to fix things and make the country a better place.
But that comment will exercise people around the country. That is unacceptable.
Completely right. And this is why Labour are finding, and to be almost to their credit perhaps, they're finding it out a lot more quickly than my lot did, that it's impossible to get anything done. It's impossible to say, right, we're going to make the economy better. Well, your breaking news just proved there that wasn't the case. They're going to smash the gangs and stop the boats. Well, those are record levels. We're going to fix the economy in other ways. And all they're doing is the same kind of stuff that the civil service tried to get the Conservatives to do, like scrapping winter fuel payments and trying to get rid of, what is it now, inheritance tax on farmers. Yeah. It's going to destroy family farms. All these ideas that are obviously terrible. They might make sense on a spreadsheet in Whitehall, but they don't make sense out there in the real world. And Labour haven't got a clue. They didn't come into office with any kind of plan whatsoever. So they're having to pick up all the discarded leftovers of 14 years of Conservative rule that we all said no to because it was so obviously damaging to the country.
Can I just ask you then, on that note, they didn't plan for government, and in many ways you can't blame them because they weren't used to being in government. But how much of this is naivety and how much of this is idiocy?
It's a great question. I think there's plenty of both to go around, to be frank with you. I think there was, again, as I say, this idea that Tories are evil, so we'll get in there because we're the good people and we can fix it. They also seem to think that they can do horrible, damaging things like scrap winter fuel payments for people who are going to freeze this Christmas. But because they're Labour, they're the good people and they can get away with it. And if they speak in this kind of tone and talk down to people, that people will know their place. Well, your listeners and viewers at home will know that that ain't going to happen. And that there's an awful lot of resentment building up for Labour because it feels like they've just lied. And so that's the naivety part. On your question about idiocy, well, the quality of people in politics is just not very high anymore. I think that's a really
Why is that?
I think there's a lot of factors. I think the fact that pay is a lot worse, and you should say, oh, it's a privilege for this, but that will just prevent people who could go off and make squillions and squillions off in the City of London or in cool startups in California or wherever else it may be, are just not going anywhere near it. And I think it's also because when you do get people of some talent going in, they realise that the system, we're talking about the civil service, again, prevents them from acting dynamically. If you go and start a business, or you're the CEO of some massive business, or even a small business, people listening at home, you can hire and fire, you can make decisions quite quickly. In fact, you have to, because you have to respond to how the world is changing. If you're the Secretary of State for Defence, you can hire or fire your 3 special advisors and that's it. You can't hire or fire anybody else in that system without lots and lots of difficulty. You don't have control over the budget because that's coming from the Treasury, and you're constrained in all kinds of ways and you can't fix it, and it's maddening.
I think there are a couple of things. There's a massive lack of expertise, as you rightly say. Also, I think there is this metropolitan bent. I don't think the government understands what it's like to live in rural communities. They certainly don't understand what it's like to live on a fixed income if you're a pensioner. And taking away the winter fuel allowance is just such a terrible look on many fronts. And actually, it's inhumane at the bottom line of that. I don't know if you've seen this clip. Yvette Cooper, she was out and about getting involved with the festive spirit, handing out mince pies, and she got savaged, I think it's fair to say, absolutely broadsided by a very angry older person who shouted, "Shame on you." Let's take a look.
I'm just shocked seeing you and Natalie. And you mince pies out to people. For what reason?
We do it every Christmas. Well, would you like one?
No.
All right.
No, I hope you're not going to win next time. I hope you're out next time. I really do.
Everybody's got different views, haven't they? But it is Christmas time. It is Christmas.
It is. You've betrayed everything that everybody voted for you for. In everything. Well, smash it, gang, load of rubbish, you know it. And you're going to house a load of them around here. We know you are. We know your plans.
Well, actually, do you know we're already...
Waspy.
Yeah, we are already cutting the asylum hotels.
What about when you got that photo done and all that with Waspy women?
Yeah, we are already...
You changed your mind with that.
We are already cutting the asylum hotels.
You know, you've got more.
No, we've actually been cutting them. We just announced the letter.
Cut Rwanda, you cut everything. This is a joke. And now you're going to try and stop people on donating. Everything's like changing.
Yeah.
That is so two-faced. Getting a mince pie out.
Yeah. It's a nice tradition for Christmas.
No. Give them a blanket because they're freezing to death.
That is two-faced. Giving a mince pie out, give them a blanket because they're freezing to death. They're freezing Yvette. You have reneged on Rwanda, the waspy women, immigration. I mean, that lady should have a knighthood.
Let's get her in the House of the Parliament.
Exactly.
Look, Yvette Cooper is right in the chronological sense that it is almost Christmas. But other than that, I am shocked sometimes. You know, I've worked in politics for maybe too long. Some people can see the grey hairs starting to appear in my beard that definitely weren't there before. But you see some politicians like that, you think there's got to be a better way to handle an angry person rather than that kind of cold, soulless response there, right? You've got to have some empathy going, I hear you. Things are tough. I'm going to take some of this on board. If you want to have a conversation, come into my surgery. We'll talk about this stuff. You know, I'm here to try and talk to people and spread some Christmas cheer. But let's talk in the new year. I want to hear about your concerns and how we can make it better.
And that's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. Is it the depersonalisation of this government which is the biggest problem? Because it strikes me that Keir Starmer is a robot. Rachel Reeves is a robot. They just repeat the same lines as though they are Daleks. They don't have any empathy with people. They don't actually understand what people are going through. And I think that's what you're seeing being levelled back at the government.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that's exactly right. And it's because you've got this civil service we talk about now that controls everything. And as you said, you interviewed Dominic Cummings. He talks about how even in cabinet meetings, the secretaries of state, they sit around that big fancy table and they're just reading off a script, what they've been written and what they've been told to do. And so the party is now starting to select for people who can do the good defensive, well, actually, we're doing this much and this much and that much, like kind of soulless automatons. And it's why somebody like Nigel Farage is endearingly popular. Okay, lots of people don't like him, but I think more and more people are probably coming round to him because at least people have the sense that he says what he's really thinking.
I think also they get the sense that actually he cares about people in this country and actually he cares about the vested interests of this country. On that note, let me just ask you about the Daily Telegraph. This is the headline: Mandelson set to work with Farage on Trump. Now, this has been brewing for a couple of days. Nigel Farage, it all started, I think, Mandelson said in a podcast he would be willing to work with Farage. Farage had said, look, I'm friends with Trump, I'm willing to work in the national interest. And now it looks like Mandelson is sort of taking him up on that offer. Many of our listeners and viewers totally exercised by this, saying this is a terrible idea. Do you welcome it?
I think, first of all, it is completely bonkers that Starmer has decided to politicise appointments to ambassadorships like this. We haven't had this for a long time. I think the only one I can think of was Peter Jay, who was Jim Callaghan's son-in-law when he got put in the same job, and that was, what, the mid-1970s, something like that. The fact that you pick somebody so obviously controversial and divisive, someone who I think has to pledge some kind of fidelity to the European Union when he was a commissioner there to get that juicy pension that he will get from them from the rest of his life, from the European Union. You can see the flags on the screen there. But I think that if you do that, then you've got to make the absolute most of it. And clearly Farage has a better relationship with the Trump team than almost anybody else. And I'm speaking as somebody who, in the early part of next year, is getting married to my American fiancée. The special relationship.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's the most important alliance in the world. And you've got Labour, if they turn their nose up at Trump because they say, oh, orange man bad, and yet they're cozying up to the genocidal, murderous, communist regime in China that locks its own people up and sterilises its own citizens. I mean, that's completely and utter madness when we could be allying with the United States.
But this is dog whistle politics, isn't it? Isn't it the intrinsic dislike of Trump, the Republican movement, that underpins all of this from Labour? And the second part to that question, if Labour and Starmer had been really clever, why wouldn't they have appointed Farage as the ambassador?
Yeah, it's a great point. Perhaps it should have been done back in the first Trump term, and that Farage wouldn't have had all the opportunities to have made all these new parties that have so disrupted politics, frankly. But you're right, it is that kind of disdain. They just say, oh, orange man bad. Well, hang on, the United States, the popular vote was won by the Republicans under Trump this time for the first time in 20-odd years. And clearly they're fed up of exactly the same kind of problems you've talked about. Joe Biden wasn't so much a functioning robot as a malfunctioning one. And Kamala Harris couldn't speak more than about 2 sentences without an auto cue. So you people would rather have a guy who can at least talk for 3 hours plus on a podcast and talk about a whole range of topics, which is what Trump and his very impressive Vice President J.D. Vance said. And also, those are people who love the United Kingdom. I don't know if people have seen this footage. Trump is sat on an aeroplane on the campaign trail. He gets this book out, and it's pictures of his visit to meet the Queen, to meet King Charles. And he says how great they are. His own mum was born in Scotland. He loves this country.
He invested in Scotland.
He wants to deal with us. He's invested in it, exactly. Why would we not cozy up to these guys who've got the strongest military in the world? We've got the closest cultural alliance. We speak the same language. Our systems are basically the same because they started off being run by Englishmen, right? Sad that they left us, but still, it's a great country, and they're not going around ethnically cleansing, sterilising, genociding their own people and trying to inflict a totalitarian communist nightmare on the world, like Labour's mates in China.
Just very quickly before I go to the break, in terms of the way the political parties are polling, we're seeing obviously Labour reduced to a rump. You've seen the rise of Reform UK. Is the Tory party dead and buried?
No, definitely not. I think people have said that about when Margaret Thatcher came in, and I think it's probably even more of a tall order that Kemi Badenoch and her team have now. But the electoral maths will be tricky when you look at those sorts of polling numbers, and I think that at some point, unless either Reform or the Tories get a huge spike and devour the other, that they'll have to have a sensible grown-up conversation at some point about some kind of alliance, whether it's official or tactical or
it will never happen.
Something
it will never happen.
Getting back in again.
There's no way it will happen, James.
I think that's probably right. But if the alternative is we get Starmer again, or one of his ghastly robot acolytes, I think some kind of coalition agreement is obviously preferable to that. And if any Tory member thinks it's better to let Labour have more time in government than Farage and Reform, then they're probably in the wrong party. James,
really good to talk to you. Congratulations on your nuptials. I hope that goes very well. And also happy Christmas to you. That's James Price there, former government special advisor.